It's a good question. What is the difference between looking at an organization through the individual lens, the collective lens, and the systemic lens? That's a really good question, because most people have no awareness that actually there is something to differentiate here, and actually to be able to step out and look at it from an observer perspective rather than a participant perspective. And the more leaders can do that, the more influence they have over the whole system. And they can see their part in it all as well. If you want to influence the system, you actually have to be able to see the system. Now, for most individuals, they see through their lens and their location in the system. So, from an individual perspective, there's how do you join somebody in that perspective and see how they are looking at the system and how they are responding to the system. So, as an individual, we are a significant influence in a system, even though we might be a small part of the system, or we might, as a leader, we obviously have much more influence in a system. But as we know, if we have somebody in the system who's disruptive or causing difficulties, they can have a very big effect on a system. So an individual can have a very large effect or less than what they have license for effect on a system. So if we're looking at the individual, we need to make sure that the individual is occupying their role and their place in a system in the most influential way, given their role and given their responsibility and given their competence and capability. And, so are they actually occupying their place in the system in the way that the system needs them to occupy it in order to realize what it's for? So there's interesting there. You've got the individual is very significant in the system, and are they actually having the impact they ought to be having in the system, given the fact that they're there and what's wanted by the system? So that means we also need to see the system. So, and then the leader needs to see that they have a place in the system and what's the impact they're having on the system, and are they having the impact they ought to be having on the system? So the attention's got to be able to move from the system to the individual. And more importantly, the higher you are in leadership, the more you need to understand that, because you can be creating unintended consequences. So that's a very big idea right there. And so often the first place that you can actually start to examine that, once you've looked at yourself, is the collective that you have direct connection with. So if I'm, for instance, if I'm the CEO and I'm leading the C-suite team, then am I actually seeing how I am impacting on that collective and how that collective is impacting on me? And is that actually working in a way that's leveraging the relationships and leveraging the opportunity? Or are there things that we're not, that the individual's not seeing, that if they could see and they could understand how they could actually influence, then they can be making that collective be more impactful on the whole system? So you can imagine at that senior level, that individual collective system view is incredibly important, because so often, I have a common experience in working with CEOs where they undermine the impact that they have on the system. So they, like all of us a little bit, have that, like in a family, do we notice when we show up what actually happens in the system? And when we leave, of course, we don't see what happens. So we don't know the comparison. So we generally just know it through our own lens. But if we're wanting to lead and shape and influence large systems, we need to have this capacity to actually see what's the impact that we have on the system, and what could we do with that? And sometimes the things that are going that are going awry, or the things that are limiting or creating resistance or disturbance, are actually coming from our inability to see that. So when we can see it and embrace it, then we have much more influence, because with awareness comes choice. So there's a interdependent relationship between all three. And if we just think it's me and the collective, we've missed the bigger perspective, where there's a huge amount of leverage if you can actually see that.